It's been less than now 24 hours since President Obama spoke at the State of the Union address. I'm now joined by Adolfo Franco, former Latin America advisor to Senator John McCain, and Liz Chadderdon, Democratic strategist and president of Chadderdon Group. So we've got a right and a left.
That's right.
This is going to be fun. Let's start with the reaction to the State of the Union. Was it what you expected? Was it as great as all the Democrats said it was?
Yes, it was really, really great. He hit it right out of the park. His cadence was right. The emphasis on the issues was right. He addressed some of the issues that he didn't address in his inauguration speech, spoke more about the economy, gave more concrete policy initiatives that he wants to get through in the next year to 2 years. It was absolutely terrific, and he got more standing ovations from both sides of the aisle than most people expected.
Were you standing?
No, I was sitting the entire time. I would say that he got very high marks from the ultra-left in the United States, Liz. A couple of things I think were striking. This is the president who had, I think, an opportunity to talk to us about real entitlement reform. He didn't do so. He basically said on Medicare status quo, which everybody knows is going to go bankrupt. Secondly, he outlined a lot of spending programs, and then it told us that he's not going to add one dime to the deficit. Of course, the deficit under Barack Obama has gone from 10 billion to 16 billion, and more than any time than the 8 years of the Bush administration. This has nothing to do with the war; it's off budget. So when you look at the totality, the president ignored the country's challenges, and more frightening from a Republican and conservative, I think, American standpoint, I think the president is committed to a large government, centralized Washington control of the U.S. economy. And we've seen with 8% unemployment, that hasn't worked.
Let's get into some of the details of the speech. One of the things that resonated with not just Americans, but with people all over the world, and it's something that the global economies have been fighting with, is this discussion of minimum wage. Whether you're in India or China or Europe, in America, Obama last night proposed increasing the minimum wage.
Absolutely, which is something that Ronald Reagan, the great bastion of conservatism himself, discussed back in the 80s, which is we have to tie minimum wage increases to inflation and to the rise in wages. We haven't done that.
But minimum wage has increased, has it not?
But not to the point where it should be. You cannot live on minimum wage. And the president is right. It is not American for someone who works 80 hours a week to live in poverty because they're working on the minimum wage. It's time to raise it.
Prosperity, opportunities, and so forth aren't going to be created by Washington, D.C. The reality is we haven't had inflation for the last few years, and there's a lot of talk about deflation. And most importantly is, what is the minimum wage in rural Mississippi?
What do you think the minimum wage should be?
It's a job killer. I think the minimum wage should be where the minimum wage stays today, right now, or leave it to the states to decide. I don't think the federal government should even, frankly, be setting other than a very low minimum wage for the country.
In fairness to our viewers around the world, right now, each individual state has an opportunity to set their own minimum wage. Is that correct?
And that's the way it should address. I'd like to ask Liz this. Is $9 the same in rural Mississippi as it is in Manhattan? Of course not. And the reality is people in Manhattan aren't making $7.25 an hour. They're making a lot more than that, but it's a job killer. I've never seen, you mentioned Ronald Reagan, he proposed increasing the minimum wage during the boom economy. This president is going to add during a time of great difficulty.
Let me go to another topic here, because $9 will get you a cup of coffee here in Washington, D.C.
Get you a lot more Mississippi.
The discussion on deficit reduction and sequestration, we've been fighting this battle now for months and months, and it came to an apex at the end of last year, and we pushed and we kicked the can down the road, so to speak, and now we're faced with another deadline on March 1st. Did the president address sequestration, and what does the president want to do exactly?
I think the president wants to see some form of a minor sequestration happen, because we are going to have a combination.
What's minor?
Well, I actually think 5% out of the defense budget is perfectly fine. I really do. I think it's time. If you're going to look at the huge pie that is the American budget, huge chunk of that is defense. You cannot talk about serious deficit reduction without talking about
For the record, we're talking about $100 billion a year over 10 years, so a little over $1 trillion,
exactly.
1.2 trillion.
Well, I would hope we don't have it, but I think the entire purpose of this is to get a combination of both spending cuts and reforms and the economy back on track, and not simply go across the board. I don't think they're always after defense, which I think is a huge mistake. I think Democrats
you're always after Medicare.
No, we're not.
Which is a huge mistake.
We want to save Medicare program, as Marco Rubio had.
You want to kick a whole lot of people off Medicare.
I don't want to kick anybody off Medicare.
We're going to just change gears a little bit. Alex, I know we've got something to show both our guests here. Let's roll the clip. All right. So after the president speaks, Marco Rubio gives the response. In the response, he seems extremely nervous. And you're watching him now. He grabbed some water. There's some sweating, and everyone seems to be talking about what he's doing rather than what he's saying. The Republican response here, I know it's funny for some folks watching, but it's also very serious as well, because he is potentially going to play a significant role in the leadership of the Republican Party in the future. What did you think of that?
I think he did himself enormous damage. I don't think he lived up to expectations, which you're right, were very, very high. Very similar to Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal in 2009. They were high for him, and he also blew the response to the State of the Union. The problem that you have is that this is a brand new level of spotlight. Yeah, Florida's a big state, and he ran for U.S. Senate, but running for president and having that level of a national audience is a brand new ballgame. He proved he can't hack it.
Okay, first of all, he's not running for United States president.
Not running for anything.
Yes, he is.
He's not running for yet.
Yeah.
But Adolfo, is it a shame that perhaps that his message or any of it got out? Because all we remember is him sweating, essentially.
Well, but I think a lot of...
What happened to the GOP message?
I think a lot of people read the message very seriously, and I think it was teed up very nicely last night. The president's message was a message of big government, expanding role for the federal government.
What's the GOP
and the GOP message was really it struck me as Reagan-esque, frankly, in terms of the message. It was the following. It was Ronald Reagan, 10 minutes into his presidency, said, government isn't the solution, it's the problem. And I think Marco Rubio took it a new step further by saying there's a role for government. He's for keeping the Medicare program as it currently exists for people who are on it, but he's for reforming the program in the future. He's for saying smaller government and wiser government is better. So I think the message resonated. I think seriously, when people will look at this, whether it's Marco Rubio or somebody else, you're right, he's not running for president. He doesn't know, who knows who the nominee of the Republican Party will be in 4 years. But that's our message. Our message is one of large government, which yielded high unemployment versus opportunity.
I wish we had an extra hour to discuss this. I want to thank both of you. Liz, Adolfo, thank you very much for coming on Biz Asia America.